Illinois faces some big challenges. Today, we're about to hear a truly honest analysis of the problems we face. Equally as important, you'll also hear an in-depth discussion of some practical solutions. This is your radio source for stories, the insight, and the answers you won't hear anywhere else. Not in the media and not coming from Springfield. You're listening to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Now, here's your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Good afternoon, Dan Proft. And joining me on this edition of Illinois Rising is Michael Lucci, Vice President Policy for the Illinois Policy Institute. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
And so we've got the possibility of a ROM recall movement afoot this week after Mayor Tiny Dancer gave his speech, his little performance before the city council. There was legislation introduced in Springfield by State Representative LaShawn Ford, representative from the west side of Chicago into the western burbs, that would provide the framework, the process for recalling the mayor of Chicago, and a particular mayor of Chicago, in this case, Rahm Emanuel. He's got one co-sponsor on it. He's got a lot of support, but it's unclear to me at this point if he's really got the necessary power structure, political support he needs in the General Assembly to move that forward and really allow community activists who want to start circulating petitions like yesterday to get about that business.
Well, there's the normal political power structure in Springfield, which is you have the guys at the top, you have Madigan and Cullerton, and they've never really shown any distance between themselves and Emanuel. They actually want to keep that coalition strong and intact and sort of in opposition to Governor Rauner. So the people that they would need to push that forward, they probably don't have. Now, maybe they're doing some political posturing. Maybe that works with their base to say, you know, we want to be able to get this mayor out of office. But that's not necessarily something that would possibly get moving in the House or in the Senate in Springfield.
It's a tricky situation, though, for Madigan and Cullerton and for the Chicago Democrat power structure in the state, because they rely on 95% of African-American families voting for them. And if they alienate them by bottling up something that they want to pursue, do they have the chance maybe of not necessarily driving everybody over to the Republican Party, but having a lot of families say, well, if you're not going to listen to us, then I'm not going to participate in supporting you? Could be interesting. I suppose part of Madigan and Cullerton's calculus is to say, well, those legislators in Chicago, those are slam dunk winners anyway. So if we lose some of the African-American vote, it's no big deal to our numbers in Springfield.
And perhaps if it was a statewide election year, if there were statewide elections going on, then they might play more to that and say, oh, we want to do something about this, because then they're worried about statewide elections like they will be in 2018. But it is a very difficult...
Right, where they have to run up big vote totals in Chicago.
Where the popular vote for a statewide election matters. It's a difficult situation for them because, as you mentioned, you're relying on 95% of a vote. You're not going to get any better than that. You can only sort of lose. I think it's an opportunity for the other side to begin eating away at that political base that really has not been well treated by the Democratic Party, by progressive policies in general. So there is a risk there. But I think that there's also an element that you take people for granted. You take a voter base for granted, and you don't think you have to do that much for them because they ask, where are you going to go? If you're not going to vote for a Democrat, where are you going to go?
Amen to all that. And speaking of amen, we're now happy to be joined by Reverend Gregory C.L. Livingston. He is one of the leaders of the Coalition for a New Chicago. Wrote a piece this week, Rahm and his aldermen must go for a new Chicago to begin. Reverend Livingston, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, always a pleasure to talk with you, Dan. Thank you.
And so kind of distill the column for us. The Rahm and his aldermen must go for a new Chicago to begin. What do we have to clear away for a new Chicago, and what's the new Chicago? How is the new Chicago going to differ from the current Chicago?
Great question. At the beginning of that, I use a couple of verses from the book of Revelation where John talks about he sees a new Jerusalem coming down, a new city, and all that. And that's one of the great visions throughout history in terms of movements and everything else, that there is a better place, a better way for humanity to exist. And so in this instance, I know we can do better than what we're doing now. Just even in terms of this recall bill, HB 4356, that we're working on, and is that if you can recall the governor of the state of Illinois, why can't you recall the mayor? And the reason you can't recall the mayor is because the dailies, set up their kingdom. What did Mike Royce call them? The American pharaohs, and all that. And so,
right.
and so this has been systemic. It's part of a place in America that needs to just be gone. And this is the 21st century, and America has evolved. We've made tremendous changes throughout the centuries and everything. And now it's time for another one. And Chicago is a great place for this to start. And so a new Chicago would be a place where there would be fairness. We're not saying there won't be problems, but the way it is right now is that corruption is the norm. And so it's about making corruption being that anomaly, that abnormality, and so to speak. So because it's crazy, and the cover-ups we've seen, all these things, the brutality, the savagery. I'm a pro-police guy, but I'm not for anybody doing that. In the way that Van Dyke shot McDonald, well, that's what gangsters and mobsters do. They keep shooting you to send a message to their colleagues. That shouldn't be the behavior of a Chicago police officer. I'm not for anybody killing anybody, but these guys, we've given them, we have a social contract with them. You guys, you protect us. So, yes, sir.
Reverend, I think that Chicagoans are feeling that. As a Chicagoan myself, we know that we're about to get hit by a property tax, and a lot of that is actually a corruption tax. The city pays so much money out in different ways, such as police settlements, that's actually starting to hit the taxpayer really hard. What do you think is the likelihood of actually moving legislation or creating a movement that could get a recall on the mayor, given where Springfield politics are, given that the Democratic machine controls not only the city, but a lot of the state house also?
Partisan politics aside, John F. Kennedy was not a civil rights president when he started. His brother Bobby, Robert Kennedy, was not a civil rights attorney general when he started. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a Southerner who came and rose to the occasion, the Great Society. Again, partisan politics aside and the like. But these were individuals who did things that they didn't come to office to do these things, And so I think that the likelihood of it is that as the people rise, this is America, and it's why we have a Constitution, and then why we have amendments to the Constitution, why we have a Bill of Rights, and why we have a Voting Rights Act, and why we have a Civil Rights Act. It's because people have dared to make a difference, dared to make a change in spite of the odds.
That's right. And I know you and your colleagues are trying to do that at the grassroots level, but here's the question. And here's what I think, my opinion, get your reaction. Here's what I think the power structure, the Madigan, the Cullerton, the Rahm, what they're relying on. Yeah, there's going to be some consternation. There's going to be protests. This is going to be in the news for a long time to come. But we've got 3.5 years. We can wait them out. People will forget. People can only keep up a protest movement for so long. And ultimately, people will kind of go back to their workaday lives, and we'll survive this if we just keep our heads down, provide some heads on sticks to satisfy the protests, but keep our heads down, push ahead, and we'll all get through 2016 and 2018 and 2019.
I think that's a valid and cogent point, and I can understand them seeing it that way. Like with a lot of the young people that are in the street, are young warriors, they're protesting and the like. And thankfully, it hasn't been like Ferguson and Baltimore. They've been, peaceful for the most part, because it could be something altogether different. But one of the things that I try to relate to them is that, just protesting is kind of like playing a football game without end zone. You're just out there, you're going back and forth, but there are no metrics, nothing to measure your progress with this, that, and the other. And especially if there are no end zones. You got a first down, a second down, but winning a down doesn't win a game. You got to get a touchdown. And in this instance, what we're giving them now is a real tool to organize around, which is this House Bill 4356. And
why only one co-sponsor? You got LaShawn Ford, you got Mary Flowers. You have a city council that chose not to act to draft an ordinance. The Blackhawks in the city council, they haven't drafted a municipal ordinance. They haven't necessarily signed on, provided full-throated support for LaShawn Ford's legislation. So where is the groundswell among legislators representing African-American wards and African-American legislative districts to sign on to this and continue to push it?
Well, one of the things my coalition, the Coalition for a New Chicago, is planning to do is to go to Alderman Edberg, go to Alderman Patrick O'Connor, two leaders in the city council, and say, look, We need everybody together, no matter the color, no matter the ethnicity. But you two guys are powerful. We need you. And Ed, you got a black son, so you don't want him treated like that. We're going to go to them and ask them, lead us through this. You guys can make a difference, do something revolutionary in city council. And if you guys lead, the other 48 will follow, And so that's part of it, is actually going to these leaders. I mean, and Ed Burke is definitely, Pat O'Connor, of course. And why can't they? And why wouldn't they? Because, every legislator should not be afraid to be accountable to their constituency. The voters shouldn't have to wait for another election if their elected official doesn't perform as they should. We've had 4 governors go to jail in Illinois. The last decade or so? I forget the...
last few decades. Let me ask you this, though. Do you think it's going to require a recall? Do you think there's any chance, based on your understanding of the political landscape in Chicago, any chance, under any circumstances, that Rahm would actually step down?
Well, I think that Rahm Emanuel is a man who is a clinical narcissist. I think that his psyche is such that he is in denial and that he really doesn't understand or get it. When he began to cry those crocodile tears that Ari wrote into his speech, that script the other day, and slammed on the podium, as Ari said, hit the podium here with your fist, bruh, everything. And he thought that was going to do it. But I really think that his psyche is such, he has forgive me, let's just call it like it is. He has a Napoleonic complex, and his psyche is such that anybody that bucks against him, he just can't deal with that. So when you ask me, will he step down? No, but I think that we could, any pipe, no matter how strong it is, will burst with the appropriate pressure.
There you go.
So
I'll tell you what. So, Reverend Livingston, I'll tell you good luck with the movement. When you get this legislation passed, email me some petitions. I'm happy to be one of your lead circulators on the recall petition. He is Reverend Gregory C.L. Livingston. He leads the Coalition for a New Chicago. Reverend Livingston, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
And our Facebook page, Coalition for a New Chicago. Thanks, Dan, so much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.